I'm Mike Uyak. I love to try new things, and I've had culinary adventures all around the world, as well as right at home. I've had really wonderful food, as well as some really horrible food. I'd like to share some of my adventures with you, and we'll see if I have what it takes to fix whatever goes wrong. This is Recipe Redemption. Greetings and salutations, Redeemers, and welcome to this edition of Recipe Redemption. Today, I think is going to be a little different because I don't think I'm going to need to redeem anything. You see, I ran across this recipe card, and on the face of it, just looking at the title, I thought, oh, this one's perfect for a Recipe Redemption because damn. But as I read the recipe, and mind you, this is a recipe for, wait for it, milk Foo Yung. Bear with me. So as I read through the recipe, it became more and more familiar, and I began to realize I've actually had this dish before, or a version of this dish. When I was in the Navy, we made a couple of stops over the course of a couple of years in Singapore. Um, one of the top three Liberty ports that we went to. I can't wait to get back. It's really expensive to get to. It's kind of expensive just to be there, but it's worth it, especially for a foodie. Singapore is this crossroads of different Asian cultures, and it's because it's kind of in the middle of everything. Um, it became a major seaport. Kind of all the different throughout Southeast Asia, all the different nations have to pass by there. So it's got a peppering of Malaysian and Chinese and Indian and Arabic and all these different ethnic groups all living in this tiny little city state. And so the mix of foods is absolutely mind blowing. So I did my research, and even at the time, as a sort of larval foodie, I knew that this was someplace special. So I did my research, and I found, especially reading a book called Strange Food, um, I was kind of looking for that different experience, something I'd never had before, and I ran across mention of the Imperial Herbal Restaurant, which is actually at the Raffles Hotel, but it's a Chinese restaurant that has a Chinese apothecary attached to it. You can actually get yourself an appointment with the doctor. They will diagnose you, say, okay, based on traditional Chinese medicine and traditional medical techniques. They diagnose you. They tell you what's wrong, a little bit of having to do with your humors, whatever, and they will prescribe dishes off of the menu for you, as well as give you, a baggie of herbs and sticks and twigs to take home and make tea. But they'll recommend a menu, a tasting menu for you at the restaurant that specifically caters to your particular medical needs. I wasn't really interested in that. I was more interested in the fact that they had weird stuff there. Um, I think in the book Strange Foods they had a dish called Ants Climbing Up a Hill, and the hill is fried shoestring potatoes fried up really crisp, and the ants are actual black ants, dead, stir fried, but sprinkled on top. And they have things like crocodile meat and et cetera, et cetera. But they had this dish that at the time they just said was called um, I think they said something like crispy egg white or something like that. They were trying to tell us Americans what it was. It's listed on the menu simply as furong, which I think is the original pronunciation, and pardon me if I butchered it, the original pronunciation for egg foo young. That's how we kind of bastardized it once it came across the pond. So Um, but this recipe, when you look at it, yes, yeah, it has a lot of milk in it, but it's an egg white um, with, in this case, crab. The one that I had at the Imperial Herbal Restaurant in Singapore had dried scallop, which is a very Chinese ingredient. It's funky, but it's kind of got a funky, not entirely pleasant seafood smell and flavor to it. But when it's added to things, it adds this complexity that's hard to get from anything else. It's kind of like in other Southeast Asian cooking, the asafoetida powder that they put into like fish curries and things like that. The powder itself smells like sweat socks. It's it's pretty bad. But once you add it in, asafoetida powder, fermented fish sauce, things like that, that give it that funkiness that you actually want to add complexity to the dish. Same thing. The dried scallop. This is sort of um, an Americanized version. Not quite as far as the egg foo young of 1950s Chinese restaurant, American Chinese restaurants, but it's a little bit more approachable to American palates. And because dried scallops are actually a little bit more difficult to get a hold of here in the U.S., crab, and in particular the canned crab that I plan on using, is more readily available. So that's what's on the menu. But it's a more familiar recipe than I thought it was when I first looked at the card. And I realized if it's as good as the one that I had at the Imperial Herbal Restaurant, there's no need to redeem it. So I made it. And it looks close. Obviously, I'm not a chef who probably makes dozens of these a day, so who knows? And I'm working off a recipe card, so who knows if this is actually accurate. But let's give it a try. But first, this is how I made it.
So this recipe actually starts with you steaming 2 crabs with ginger and scallions, and I didn't want to do that for 2 reasons. One, because it's extra work that I didn't really feel like doing, and two, crab is stupid expensive at the time of recording of this video, and so I also didn't want to do that. So I'm going to use canned crab for this recipe. But in any case, there goes the canned crab. Added to 6 egg whites and 1 1/4 cups of milk, and this is a half a cup of crab meat that I just added and stirred together. To which I add 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. This will help thicken it up once it cooks, and this makes it sort of a batter. In the meantime, I have what ends up being not quite enough oil heating on the side here, and I'm going to throw in a whole bundle of these vermicelli-style rice noodles and fry them up on both sides until it just starts to color and crisps up really well. This is going to form the sort of bird's nest base for this dish and adds a pleasing crunchy texture to what is otherwise kind of gloopy. Speaking of the gloop, into that same oil, once I've removed the vermicelli noodles off to the side to drain, I should probably have added about 1/3 of this volume, or 1/6 of the mixture. This is too much for too little oil, so I cooled the pan down, and this is going to be significantly greasier than it should have been, but it'll work. And as you can see, it's sort of fried up into these little curds instead of a more cohesive mass. But I'm going to drain it out with this slotted spoon and sort of ladle it over the top of these vermicelli noodles. And I'm going to top this with chopped scallions and diced ham and serve.
So, couldn't really be simpler. Once I had all the ingredients together, it took, all of, less than 10 minutes to make. Um, really all the waiting time was just waiting for the oil to heat up. So I made it. It's close. Let's see if it tastes close. I want to get some of this crunchy vermicelli. There we go. Now get some crunchy stuff. You know, the aroma of the crab comes through. I'm going to get a little green onion, a little ham in there. Do I have any of the crunchies? I do not. There. Now I have a little of everything. Like I said, deep frying helps everything. It is not as delicate as I remember. Mind you, I didn't follow the instructions exactly. I didn't start with fresh crab. I had canned crab, so I didn't steam it with the green onions and the ginger. The green onions and the ginger are actually in here. Both flavors are prevalent. They're not overpowering. I don't think that was a big deal. Um, the crab is not as strong as I thought it was going to be. Um, the vermicelli adds a nice textural crunch to it. The ham is nice. It just said seasoning, and it said salt and MSG, but it didn't really give me any amounts. So I would probably have to play with the seasoning on this. I like that crunch. So I think the redemption would be just to learn how to do this better. Um, it's pretty good. It's quite oily. I think there's a secret to this dish that I'm not getting. Uh, because draining it as well as I could still wasn't quite good enough. It's quite oily. Flavors are very subtle. And I think what I might do differently on this is if there's some way to, well, use less milk, and if there's some way to at least partially whip the egg whites, so that they're just a little bit airier, a little bit fluffier, not to the point where you have like stiff peaks or anything, because we're not making meringue, but to somehow lighten this up and make it more fluffy, kind of cloud eggy, without making a cloud egg. I think would improve the texture, and then maybe get a better spider so I actually drain the oil a little better than I did. But still quite tasty. I don't think, other than just improving my technique, I don't think this recipe actually needs a redemption. It just needs to be renamed. Milk Foo Yung sounds weird. People are like, what is that? But, something like, I don't know, fluffy egg white in a bird's nest or something. Just so the name itself isn't the off-putting part of the recipe. Otherwise, it's quite tasty. I recommend you give it a try and see if you did better than I did. Let me know how that turns out. And if you have any other recipes you'd like me to try, let me know. Well, so until next time, ooh, that's really oily. So until next time, I'm Mike Kuyak. Thank you for watching. I'll see you here again on Recipe Redemption.